Hey man, say man, what's good YouTube? It's your boy Quez the Plug, man. I'm back in the banger, man. We got NBA fans are wrong about Larry Bird. Honestly, I don't know what this video gonna be about. It's a relatively new channel. I never heard this channel before, so I'm curious to see what NBA fans are wrong about Larry Bird. I ain't gonna lie, it's a lot, bro. It's a lot. Niggas think Bird don't play defense. Bird used to play defense. Bird, they don't know how good a rebounder Bird was. One of the best rebounders ever. 6'10", averaged 10 boards at the small forward position, and he wasn't athletic, so Bird was like probably one of the greatest clutch shooters ever. A lot of fans don't know that. The younger fans. Shit, it's a lot of things people don't know about Bird, man. But like, comment, subscribe. Let's get into it.
What if I asked you to tell me what comes to mind when you hear the name Larry Bird? You would probably think of things such as his great shooting. After all, Larry Bird had multiple 50, 40, 90 seasons.
Facts.
And who can forget seeing him famously win the three-point contest in his warm-up
Just react
year?
to that.
Perhaps
Just watched the three-point contest the other day. Check it out on the channel.
you would think of his crazy passing. After all, you can find
Oh
highlights
yeah, and a lot of NBA fans know he was one of the best passers ever, bro. That nigga passing ability is crazy. A lot of people don't know that though.
after highlight of just some of the most ridiculous passes in NBA history. Perhaps you would think of the great rivalry between him and Magic Johnson. After all, it's hard to talk about one without the other. Or you could think of individual moments such as Larry Bird hitting game winners,
Facts.
or playing a game with only his left hand. All of these are great Larry Bird things. However, what many fans probably don't think about is Larry Bird's defense. After all, the terms Larry Bird and defense aren't commonly associated. Because Larry Bird was unathletic, surely he couldn't play defense properly. And the more and more I consume NBA discourse, a very commonly held opinion today is that Larry Bird was not a great defender. But what if
See, I ain't gonna say Bird was a great defender, but he was a solid defender. Let's see if he proved me wrong. That's my take right now. I feel like he's a solid defender, but an elite, great defender? Nah, I don't know. I know he finished top 5 defensive player of the year voting like one time, and he led the league in defensive win shares or something like that like 4 times, but still, I don't think he's a great defender.
If I were to tell you that this is something NBA fans get totally wrong about Larry Bird, and as time goes by, more and more people just assume he was a bad defender, or at the very least, not very good. And I get it, you look at Larry Bird, you don't particularly
Oh my
see
God,
the most
drop that
athletic
boy.
specimen ever, and you think, sure, he can play great offense, however, surely he got exposed defensively, right? Or at least they would hide him away? Well, that is precisely what I used to believe about Larry Bird, and what I find many people in the NBA community still believe to this day. It's hard to have a debate ranking players all time without someone knocking Larry Bird because they assumed he was a bad defensive player because he was unathletic. However, the more and more I dug into the facts, the more I realized how truly incorrect this idea was. Larry Bird was actually a very good to great defender. Now, I never got to watch Larry Bird play live, as his career was well before my lifetime, but I also think I can share a unique perspective because I changed my perception around Larry Bird as I watched more highlights and as I dug into the numbers. But before I get into the major reasons why Larry Bird was actually a very good defender, first I want to confront what I believe is the biggest reason people undervalue his defense.
Let's see.
Which is the fact that Larry Bird is seen as unathletic. Now, admittedly, Larry Bird wasn't...
Yeah. A casual will see Larry Bird unathletic and instantly think he doesn't play defense. I mean, it makes sense, or that he doesn't have the ability to play defense. But even though he was unathletic, Bird had that dog in him. He had that hustle in him to, to actually try and give his all on defense. Even though he wasn't athletic, so he couldn't do everything he could do. A lot of people can do, but don't do. Like, there's a lot of athletic players in the league today that don't use their athleticism to play defense. That's the problem, bro. They got the tools to play, but they don't got the mentality to play it.
One of the best athletes in the league, but he also wasn't as unathletic as people made it out to seem. And when I really started to watch more Larry Bird highlights, I realized he was a lot quicker and more athletic than people claimed.
Yeah, he was agile.
And I believe that this quote by Dave Cowens, who played with Bird early in his career, perfectly sums it up. People always say he wasn't fast, but Bird was quick. He had a great first step and could get by people. And he could handle the ball with that first step. He had a quick mind and a quick release. There wasn't anything that he did not do well. He was a really tough cover for the other team. And when you really look at Larry Bird highlights, especially in the earlier part of his career, you can see him sprinting up and down the court with some of the best athletes. There are other great moments, such as him famously dunking on Dennis Rodman. I think a major part of the reason people undervalue his
that won't even dunking on Dennis Rodman
is the way he looked in the last few seasons of his career. where Larry Bird famously had a lot of back issues. We are often heavily influenced by the most recent things we see of players.
Recency bias.
Which in turn, I think, has led people to undervaluing his athleticism. And
But I feel like it go both ways though. A lot of old people they don't like, they literally just hate the new era, so they like undervalue the new era too. So it go both ways. But recency bias and like old people, they only love their era. They hate the new era. So it go both ways. Because a lot of people, like they hate players today. Like a lot of players today that should be ranked higher, they don't. Like Curry, LeBron, they just hate on them because it's the new generation, and when we play, it's way different than how they used to play. So they ain't used to it, and they don't want to adjust to it. So,
and by extension, his defense even more. After all, how could someone as slow as Larry Bird play proper defense? Now, after explaining why Larry Bird was actually a lot more athletic than people claim, I still think it's important to acknowledge that while athleticism certainly helps with defense, I still find people overvalue it and undervalue other things such as defensive instincts and defensive IQ. However, Larry Bird had great awareness and instincts on the defensive end, so he was a strong team defender, and he was also athletic enough with great instincts to play some pretty good individual defense.
Yeah, I feel like he was more of a team defender than an individual defender. That's why I feel like he's a great team defender, but a solid to average like individual defender.
Not to mention, Larry Bird was pretty good at using his 6'10" height to at least bother the offensive players. But something I feel which has been lost with time is that Larry Bird was actually named to the All-Defensive Second Team 3 times before injuries slowed him down towards the end of his career.
That's tough.
So he must have been acknowledged as a pretty good defender to make these All-Defensive teams multiple times. Now I get it.
Hey, thank you for whoever just subscribed to me. I appreciate it.
Awards aren't everything, but they can reflect the media and fans' perception around the player. So it's very hard to believe that if the NBA media at the time thought he was a good defender, that somehow he was just tricking everyone. In addition to the media at the time awarding him these all-defensive team selections, the advanced stats strongly support the idea that Larry Bird was a good defender. Now I understand that advanced stats...
You gonna use advanced stats to prove Bird was a great defender? I'm not even gonna lie, I really don't like advanced stats, bro. I feel like they should be used, but to a certain extent, bro. Like, you can't just go off advanced stats and say somebody the greatest player, like the best player in the league or something like that. Like, the eye test and advanced stats, they go hand in hand. I don't feel like one should be above the other.
Shouldn't be the only thing you look at, but I also think that they can at least provide more context and more information to use alongside accolades and the eye test.
Yeah.
Furthermore, advanced stats can provide a better picture than simply going off of points, rebounds, and assists, because the advanced stats have ways of accounting for other factors, such as changes in pace, depending on the era you played in. And looking at Larry Bird's advanced defensive stats, they are all very good to great. Now first, as the saying goes, the defensive possession doesn't end until the defensive rebound is secured, and Larry Bird was a very strong defensive rebounder, who would usually get the break going with quick outlet passes. And defensive rebounding is a very big part of defense, and even as a small forward, Larry Bird averaged 8 defensive rebounds per game. But looking at the advanced stat defensive rebounding percentage, Larry Bird currently sits 7.
They said he averaged 8 defensive rebounds per game, or rebounds all in general.
74th advanced stat defensive rebound percentage. Larry Bird currently sits 74th all time.
Hold on, my bad, Joe. I'm trying to see some.
With defensive rebounding, 8 defensive
oh,
rebounds.
Okay, defensive rebounds.
But looking at
I was say I thought he averaged 10 boards on his career, so he averaged 2 offensive and 8 defensive. Makes sense.
The advanced stat defensive rebounding percentage, Larry Bird currently sits 74th all time with a defensive rebounding percentage of 22.37. For context, this is above other small forwards like LeBron, Kawhi, Durant, and above many other great defensive
That's so wait. So LeBron and KD got a better percentage than Kawhi Leonard. Well, this is rebounding. Now I'm thinking of defense. This is just defensive rebounding. Let me chill.
Of course, I understand this is only a single aspect of defense, and I'm not saying that ranking higher than a different player in a certain category makes you better defensively. But it's only to show that if Larry Bird consistently ranks high in the advanced defensive stats, where you typically find many of the best defenders sitting at the top of these lists, then in all likelihood, Larry Bird was also probably a very good defender. For context, looking at defensive rebounding percentage, players like Gobert, Dwight Howard, Rodman, Duncan, Garnett, they all sit at the very top. Now, admittedly, he's only ranked 250th all-time for block percentage.
Damn.
However, that's still pretty good when you consider the sheer number of crazy good athletes the NBA has seen. And
let me say something, bro. I ain't never heard somebody say defensive rebounding percentage makes you a good defender, bro. I ain't gonna lie. There's so many centers in the league that can get 10 rebounds a game but are terrible at defense. So like I feel like there's no correlation. I'm sorry.
Block percentage will skew more towards the power forwards and the centers. So for context, Michael Jordan ranks 217th, while Kawhi Leonard ranks 194th and LeBron is 191. Moving on to a different category, Larry Bird ranks a little higher in steal percentage, finishing 133rd on the all-time list with a 2.16 career steal percentage. Now, even looking at the basic stats, Larry Bird was great at getting steals and would average 1.7 steals for his entire career.
Tough.
Because after all, Bird's most famous defensive play was the steal in Game 5
Interceptions.
of the 1987 Conference Finals. And while Larry Bird was not John Stockton when it came to steals, his instincts and feel for the game made him a threat to get tons of steals. In addition, Larry Bird ranks 61st all-time in defensive rating with a defensive rating of 101.44.
That's
Now,
tough.
defensive rating can be complicated. However, it's still a useful stat to use alongside the others when evaluating who are good defenders. And it's no surprise that many of the all-time greatest defenders sit at the very top of this list.
Who at the top?
Moreover, Larry Bird ranks at the crazy position of 37th in defensive box plus minus, with a defensive box plus minus of 1.77. What is probably another surprise is that Larry Bird ranks 30th all-time in defensive win shares, with a defensive win share of 59 for his career.
That's tough.
And sure, win shares can be a complicated stat. For context, the players with the 5 best defensive win shares are Bill Russell, Tim Duncan, Kareem, Olajuwon, and Wilt, all of which are unanimously seen as some of the very best defenders.
I mean, yeah, these damn near top 5 defense centers ever. Throwing Dwight Howard, Ben Wallace, shit, Kevin Garnett, a couple other players too. I'm forgetting, but shit, Dennis Rodman in there. We talking about the best defensive big man.
History. So it's only logical to assume that if the very best defenders in league history rank at the very top of the defensive stat, then the defensive stat probably has some merit when it comes to determining if you're a good defender when you use it alongside other stats, accolades, and the eye test. And another Larry Bird accomplishment, which often gets glossed over, is the fact that Larry Bird led the league in defensive win shares 4 times.
Yeah, 4 times.
Admittedly, while advanced stats are a way of adding more clarity, they do have some limits and should be used in addition to other things. Perhaps you really don't care about advanced stats and really rely on the eye test. I suppose the tricky thing about the eye test is that everyone has different opinions on what passes the eye test for them.
That's facts.
But from everything I watched, I truly believe Bird passes the eye test. From watching highlights of him playing games in the playoffs and the regular season,
Of course.
he's athletic enough and moves well enough laterally to play good individual defense. But once you add in his phenomenal instincts, I think it would surprise a lot of people how great he is with anticipation and how this helps him rack up the steals and secure a ton of defensive rebounds. Not to mention he was great at using his height to at least bother offensive players with good contest.
He a hustler.
He is 6'10". And you might still say, well, you didn't watch him live, so how can you really tell? Some YouTube highlights will never paint a proper picture. And to that I would answer, well, the media covering the league at the time must have thought he was a good defender because he got multiple All-NBA defensive team selections.
But I also heard that back then, like, voting like that was really, really popularity based. So, like, even worse than it is today.
And even if you say,
But
these
I'm not
selections
undermining
don't
his
prove he was a good
accomplishments, though.
defender, these used in conjunction with great defensive stats are a pretty good indicator that he was a very good defender. And to be fair, as the 80s went on, the Celtics surrounded Bird with other strong defenders, Kevin McHale, Dennis Johnson. But even looking back at articles and headlines and the media awards, Larry Bird was viewed by most of the time as a pretty strong defender on the team, not as any kind of liability. I truly believe that as more and more time has gone by since Larry Bird's career, especially the peak of his career, many more NBA fans start to cling to these narratives that he was incredibly unathletic, he was slow, he wasn't a good defender, and as this happens more and more, the reality of the situation gets lost with time. All of this is to say Larry Bird was a very good to great defender, and I believe that his defensive accolades, the advanced defensive stats, and the eye test all back this up.
What I'm gonna say is, bro, his best defensive attribute is effort, bro. That's all it is. Anybody can play defense, bro. You just gotta show effort, bro. And Bird, his mentality, bro, he was unathletic, don't matter. He gonna play defense. He gonna get in that passing lane. He gonna get a steal. He gonna dive on the floor. It's just the things like that that make you a great defender, bro. And that's what a lot of mentality the players today don't got, bro. Niggas is too good to get on the floor for a ball or to risk injury to dive on the floor. People they think they too good for that, bro. But that's why they come down to, bro. It's effort, and that's what Bird showed, and that's why he was still a great defender, even with his athletic limitations, bro. That's just what it come down to. But like, comment, subscribe, man. We out.